Hello, I'm Bill Young, and welcome to Truth to Mormons. This will be a relatively short episode, by my standards at least, as I'm still getting caught up after some much needed vacation time. But I want this episode to be a primer, basically, for what I'm working on to follow. The last video on Mormon ideological possession, as well as the previous episode that it was addressing, has really been eye-opening for non-LDS viewers, I'm sure, and hopefully even for some open-minded LDS viewers. When addressing the deceitful and unlawful shell game that the Mormon Church was caught in and fined for by the Securities and Exchange Commission, we've watched a couple LDS defend really the indefensible, spinning this scandal into nothing at all. A mere parking ticket, just some administrative errors, no intent to deceive, no dishonesty, no ethical or moral failures by a prophet and his apostle counselors, just some bad advice from rogue attorneys and financial managers. Disregard the Mormon managers who either left the church or resigned their positions as being in one of the shell companies out of conscience after learning how they had been used or how the church was acting. They must have overreacted to the proverbial parking ticket, I guess. Pretty extreme when you think to quit over such administrative errors. Or could it be perhaps that they were ideologically possessed and blinded, and they finally saw a window into how the LDS Church operates and how it shocked their conscience? That's indeed what happened for them. They were high enough up to see the inside guts, the working of the church, and they didn't like what they saw. Of course, the Mormon president and his apostles have to be defended if you're a Latter-day Saint, and rendered harmless and guiltless if you believe they are leading the one and only true church on the face of the planet, and that they're hearing directly from God, and that the president is the only man who speaks on all things authoritatively from God. Our resident LDS gatekeeper protects them by running worn-out apologetic scripts that God works through imperfect people. Problem solved, right? Parking ticket, intentional multi-decade scheme of deception, same, I guess. We can still trust these men to tell us the truth after this point, right? When they say God says, we can still trust them, right? When they say that they consider this matter closed, we shouldn't hold them accountable or think about this anymore, should we? You see, let's be real. Surely, such men wouldn't approve over 20 years of calculated deception, right? That can't be entertained by LDS because it's an existential threat if they've been trusting in a false church and a false leadership. So then, the spin we have witnessed in the comment section has really been something to see. And all the while, an LDS gatekeeper objects to any warnings that he might be indoctrinated, brainwashed, hacked, under mind control, under undue influence, pick whatever title you wish. As viewers know, I prefer the term ideological possession, and I can assure you that's what most LDS are captured by, as I was when I was a Latter-day Saint. I'm not speaking academically here. I'm speaking from a lived personal experience of 20 years under the influence of Mormonism. While LDS watching this are no doubt getting their hackles up, the fact is, you don't realize that you're under undue influence when you're under its power. That's what makes it so insidious and so dangerous. LDS, maybe you should listen to those who are trying to get through to you. Something has to disrupt your possession so as to motivate you to start investigating and to do so in an even-handed and thoroughgoing manner. Something has to chink your ideological armor, if you will, to get you to entertain even the outside possibility that you really could be in a cult after all, just like everyone outside of your system has been trying to warn you of. Are they all wrong? Or could it just be that you're not willing to risk the chance and the potential existential crisis that might happen if you discover that you've been sold a lie? And a whopper at that, I can tell you. I was. And that's what this channel is all about, trying to warn my former LDS community that you've been lied to as well. And the eternal consequences are not 5 levels of heavenly kingdoms in the Mormon Church, but a biblical heaven or hell. And sadly, hell it will be if you don't wake up and flee. So then I have a rather academic video coming up for you in the next episode. We're going to consider physiological, psychological, sociological, and lastly, biblical aspects of ideological possession. To this point, we've seen it in action in previous episodes, and I told you that sometimes you just have to see it to recognize it, and I hope you have. But in the next episode, we're going to put down some definitions. We're going to look at methods, and then we're going to actually practice detecting if you yourself might be ideologically possessed. So to get ready for this really educational workshop, I want this episode, again, to be a primer to get you ready. So in a moment, we're going to drop in on a short TED Talk by Dr. Stephen Hassan, a former Moonie who escaped that cult and has since earned his doctorate in studying destructive ideologies and methodologies. I've already had one Mormon in the comments section dismiss his BITE model, B-I-T-E, his BITE model of authoritarian control as being useless and ineffectual in that it applies to everybody. And so it doesn't apply to Mormonism. This really only tells me that he's not only ideologically possessed, but that he evidently doesn't know how the model works, and that it applies to far more than religious cults. Cults don't have to be religious. And in fact, any one of us could potentially identify elements of mind control in our lives if we apply the BITE metric. And I'm going to discuss how that happens in the next episode as well. You probably don't realize how much you're exposed to that you can be captured by and don't even realize it. So if you haven't heard of the BITE model before, I would encourage you to, I thought I had the book here on my desk, evidently I don't. I would encourage you to take a peek at it, and I've included where you can find it in the show notes on this episode. But BITE stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. Again, I've had his book on my bookshelf for years, and for the Latter-day Saint in particular, it says you've done your homework. Can I just say, if you don't have that book on your bookshelf, then you haven't done your homework. So at some point, I will present a thoroughgoing treatment of this model, as it certainly applies to Mormonism, but really now isn't the time. I guess our ideologically possessed Mormon in the comments section who dismissed this model previously knows more about how cults function than a highly respected expert who has both lived a cult experience himself and has now, having come out of it, studied it, lectured on it, done a doctoral dissertation on it, wrote a book on it, and provided exit counseling now for some 45 years. Do you think there's maybe something we can learn from his experience? So during Hassan's talk, he mentions things that I can certainly relate to and that I covered in my previous Why I Left episode. That's episode 29, and I encourage you to go back and watch it if you haven't already. He mentioned a significant event that disrupted his life enough to temporarily remove him from the continual indoctrination that he was under, giving him really the safety and the time to investigate what he was living. Watch to hear what that event was, but that was certainly me as well. Not until I left my Mormon bubble in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and moved away to join the military did I become exposed to those who thought differently than me. And not until I met an attractive young lady who would later become my wife did I allow this attraction to give me permission, and yes, to motivate me enough to investigate what Baptists believe. That's what she was, that's what we still are, and why they consider Mormonism a cult. Before that, I would have laughed at you and dismissed you as LDS on this channel do if you said that I was in a cult. But because I wanted to win this lady over, and love was what disrupted my paradigm and motivated me to dig deep and investigate my beliefs, that is what it took. That was the life disruption that started putting chinks in my LDS anti-gospel armor system and my ideological possession, if you will, as I started discovering things about my former faith that I was not taught, that were whitewashed, that were highly objectionable, and most importantly, were unbiblical. I mean, that is the ultimate standard. Had that not happened, had I not left Michigan, I shudder to think of where I'd be today. So Dr. Hassan also mentions the duality or the dual identity that ideologically possessed people have. You don't know you have it, Latter-day Saints. I'm sure you're snickering now. Go ahead. But there is a real you, a genuine you, and then there's the indoctrinated you. And you're not going to see that until you come out of your indoctrination. And that's what this channel is about. And I pray that someday that will be something that you can praise the Lord about. And then I want you to pay attention to another dynamic that Dr. Hassan mentions, and that's the technique that cults use called thought stopping. I've mentioned that before, and boy, have I seen that displayed in the comments section of this channel. And the LDS that are doing it, I don't think even know they're doing it. They're just repeating cliches that they've been taught. Dr. Hassan then provides an excellent illustration from an object he pulls out of his pocket that we've probably all played with at one time or another as kids or even as adults. I wish I would have thought of that, but it's an excellent example of what cults do and what you have to do to get out of one, and you're going to have to stay tuned to find out what that object lesson is. And I'll just mention one more thing. And it's not intended to be self-serving, but it's so appropriate. If you're ever to discover the ideological possession that you're captured by, then Dr. Hassan counsels that you need to purposely seek out critics and former members of your beliefs. And how fortuitous, Latter-day Saints, here you are. But seriously, that's not human nature for us to do. We're all pulled by confirmation bias to read and to listen to those things that confirm our currently held beliefs, at least when it comes to faith. And I suspect you could even make that case when you are watching a particular news channel because they agree with you. One Latter-day Saint in the comments section says he's done his research, and that's why he's still a Mormon. But I can almost guarantee you that he hasn't read just as much literature against Mormonism than he has for it. I'm not the model, but I've said this before. If you were to search the bookshelves in my study right now, I would guess that you would find about a 50-50 mixture of about as many books against my personal views as you would that confirm my views. And why is that? Because when I realized that Mormonism was one big, intricate web of lies, I couldn't trust anything that I thought I knew after that point. So I had to back up. I had to challenge every proposition that I thought I knew, every context, every axiom, every supposition. And the only way to do that well is to read widely and to take the time to dig deep and to sit with what you're reading for a while. And I can tell you, just like going through maybe graduate work in college, this kind of study and research and original work is exhausting. It's difficult. And yes, it can be very unsettling, but you had better do it if you love your soul. So then I say that to encourage Latter-day Saints on this channel. At least you found a place where you will be challenged. And I don't know if you realize that I do this on purpose, that at times I am rather direct. I'm never trying to be offensive, but I am direct and even maybe a little pithy at times on this channel. What I'm doing is trying to provoke you to check your assumptions. I know after I had finally heard people when I was a Mormon tell me I was in a cult, I had heard that so much. That was one of the things that ultimately triggered me to start looking and searching to prove them wrong, because I thought it was such an outrageous claim. I mean, we even had Jesus Christ in the title of our church. How can I be in a cult? But it was that provocation that got me looking, okay? And so I'm trying to be a disruptor that shakes you out of your self-confident Mormon echo chamber and gets you to reconsider what you've been trusting your eternal life with. But that's not going to help you if you come on here with the idea of swatting down everything you hear and defending the fort, and that's what I'm seeing a lot of. So why don't you just listen for a while, reflect, ask some what if questions. Some of you respond so quickly that I doubt you've really sat with the episodes and thought them through very well first. And some of you, Elder Melms, keep running the same script like an avatar over and over and over again as though you didn't watch this video because it's quick. And you can get on there real quick and put your rebuttal down in the comment section before anybody else reads that. And so that tells me you're not actively listening. If you are listening, you're working out your rebuttal rather than just sitting and taking it in. Okay? So then I'm going to return to working on the next unique, thought-provoking, exhilarating episode that I know Latter-day Saints crave and keep coming back to this channel for. But until then, can I just ask you to sit back and listen, really listen to Dr. Hassan? What can you learn from his talk? So I won't be returning after the TED Talk, so I want to say so long here, and thanks for watching. And as always, until next time, take care and God bless.
How could you tell if your mind has been brainwashed, or your mind has been hacked, or you've been subjected to mind control, or hypnosis, or undue influence? The people who want to persuade want you to stay ignorant. The authoritarian cults, that, including Putin, who grew up in the Soviet Union, which was a political cult, and I'm happy to talk about that. The psychology of influence has morphed in the decades, and I'm here to share with you. It was 1974, February. My girlfriend dumped me. I was an upper junior at Queens College, the youngest of 3 kids, of Milton and Estelle Hassan of Flushing, Queens, New York. Yes, I grew up 1.3 miles from Cult 45, DT. These women approached me in the student union and deceptively recruited me into a friend group of this, turned out to be a cult. And within 2 weeks, I was believing that World War III was about to happen, that Armageddon was coming, that Moon was the greatest man in human history. He was sinless. And for those of you who are too young to know about the Moonies, he's best known for the mass wedding ceremonies. He did 30,000 couples at one time of total strangers, but who believed in him as the Messiah. And within 2 weeks, I left my Judaism, and I'm bowing to an altar with Moon's picture on it, reciting a pledge to fight with my life or kill for Korea. I'm not joking. And I was elevated to leadership very quickly. I guess they saw me as a nice American, tall, whatever. And so I was privy to these secret leadership meetings with Moon about how he talked about democracy was satanic. He talked about taking over America and amending the Constitution and make it a capital offense for people who don't do what he says regarding the marriages. And I was a fanatic. My family freaked. My friends freaked. Steve, it's a cult. You're being brainwashed. I knew I wasn't brainwashed because I'm smart. I'm educated. I'm from a good family. I didn't feel brainwashed. I was having a religious experience. And guess what? When Moon said, we're all going to the Capitol steps to fast for 3 days for Nixon because God wants him to be president despite Watergate, and I called my father, who had voted for Nixon. I voted for McGovern. I said, hey, Dad, I'm fasting for Richard Nixon to be president, thinking he would love it. He said, Steve, you are right. He's a crook. I said, Dad, you don't understand. God is working. He said, Steve, now I know you're brainwashed. And my father got his chance. Within 2 years, I fell asleep at the wheel of a van due to sleep exhaustion. I should say I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, 7 days a week, for no pay, working for Father. And I fell asleep at the wheel of a van, drove into the back of a tractor-trailer truck at 80 miles an hour, and nearly died, and was trapped for 30 minutes while the rescue workers saved my life. And there I was in a hospital for 2 weeks away from the cult. And by the way, this was 1976, so there were no cell phones, right? So I was away from the constant indoctrination. And I called my sister. I actually broke a rule. I called my sister Thea, and she said, "You have a nephew. I want him to know his Uncle Stevie. You got to visit." I'm like, "Don't tell the parents. I think I can arrange it because I'm a leader." And she did tell my parents, and they arranged a deprogramming. And it's a long story, but my father cried, and he said, "How would you feel if it was your son who met a controversial group, dropped out of college, quit his job, donated his bank account, and disappeared from your life? How would you feel?" And he cried. And it got me right here. And I said, "I'd probably do what you're doing now." But I thought he was brainwashed by the communist media. That's how I was indoctrinated. So I said, "I'd probably be doing what do you want me to do?" He said, "Just listen to these ex-members, learn about brainwashing and mind control, and if you want to go back at the end of 5 days, I'll drive you there myself." I said, "Done," because I was so fanatical. I was so confident that I had the truth. And little did I know, on day 4, when I learned about Chinese communist brainwashing from former military intelligence people who had studied it in the 50s, it ticked off every box. But wait a minute, we were God and communism was Satan, but it was the same brainwashing techniques. But that still wasn't enough to get me out. The following day, the deprogrammers asked me to read one of Moon's speeches and said, "What do you think, Steve?" And I read it, and for the first time in 2.5 years, I had a negative thought. I thought, what a liar. Moon was talking to congressmen and senators saying how much he loved America and respected Americans, and he was surprised that he was being accused of brainwashing Americans. And I had heard him speak in person at least 100 times, how stupid Americans were, right? But once I had that thought, he's a liar. That means he's not trustworthy. That means he can't be of God. And it was like a house of cards going plop, 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 plop in my mind. And I cried for 3 hours. And here I am, 45 years later, trying to share my experience with the planet because everyone needs to understand this is not a mystical thing. You've heard of MK Ultra, the CIA research into mind control. The Russians were doing it. There was a Cold War run-up. I was MK Ultra 3.0. I would have died on command, killed on command. And thank God my family rescued me. So I'm here to tell you there's a dual identity that happens. There was Steve Hassan of Flushing, Queens, and then Steve Hassan, the son of Moon and his wife, the true parents of the universe. The real Steve reacted to my father's tears. And now I want to tell a fast story. I know I'm running out of time. Fast story. My father called me up when I was in the cult, thinking that he could get me out by just giving me facts. Sounds familiar? He said, "Steve, what kind of messiah has an M16 gun factory?" Little did he know I was trained to do thought stopping, which is a cognitive behavioral technique. I was crush Satan, glory to heaven, peace on earth, glory to heaven, peace on earth, crush Satan, crush Satan. So my father's intention was to get me to think, but he drove me deeper in. And I have a little party prop that I want to share. It's actually called Chinese handcuffs. Have you ever seen this? The harder you pull, the tighter it gets. But if you explain to the person, you can get out of it by just putting your fingers together, using your thumbs to push. And voila. So what I'm here to share in my remaining time is a reality testing strategy. It's remarkably simple. And it's based on my doctoral dissertation on the BITE model of authoritarian control and my influence continuum. Step 1, disconnect. We are addicted to our cell phones, and people who are in mind control cults are constantly being reinforced. So we need to take, I'm challenging anyone who's listening to this. If you're sure you weren't brainwashed like I was, take a time out. Turn off your phone, turn off your screens for a week. Okay? Step one, learn about Chinese communist brainwashing and the major models. And I'm here to tell you that I did for my doctoral program the first quantitative study on the BITE model of authoritarian control. And the B is behavior control, the I is information control, the T is thought control, and the E is emotional control. And the model basically says you have to think about an ethical influence side of informed consent, for example, where you know up front who the people are, what they believe, and what is expected, versus deception, outright lying, withholding vital information, or distorting it. And I have a much more robust influence continuum, but for simplicity's sake, I want to tell you that cognitive dissonance theory, which is from Leon Festinger, formed the basis of this. I added information control. But I have detailed behaviors that can show authoritarian control in a relationship, in a multi-level marketing group, a political situation, a religious group of any type. And the next step is seek out deliberately the best critics and most high-level former members you can find. Why? Because if you're in a mind control cult, you're programmed. Don't listen to the media. The media is the enemy of the people. Don't talk to apostates. They don't know anything. Take the position, hey, I'm an adult. It's my mind, and I get to decide. I can look at the evidence and think for myself. And it's a version of this, encouraging people to think for themselves as opposed to yelling at them, calling names. And listen for the facts. Next is honest self-reflection. Think back to your first exposure to the group. And for those of you born into authoritarian families or religious groups, there's a special variation of this for you. Or if you were born in North Korea or China, it's a little bit different. But honest self-reflection, for me, I had to think back. I was writing poetry. I wanted to teach English, right? And I wasn't interested in money. I wasn't interested in power. And Moon was, the higher I got up in the cult, I was like being told things like, hey, Steve, you should think what country you want to run when we take over the world. I was 21 years old. But that was my Mooney self, not the real Steve. Honestly self-reflect, using the BITE model, thinking over key experiences, and then ask yourself, if I knew then what I know now, would I have ever gotten involved? The women lied to me. They said they were students. If I knew they were Moonies, I would have told them to get lost. I would have called security. Wake up, honest self-reflection. Look at yourself in the mirror. It's your life. It's your mind. You should control it, right? I'm part of a group of colleagues and friends. We're trying to do a Me Too moment. This is the call to action. If you are ever in an abusive relationship, a cult of any type, a company that was abusing you, and I haven't mentioned trafficking. Trafficking is illegal worldwide. Fraud, force, or coercion. And fraud and coercion forms my whole model. So I did my dissertation connecting the dots with all of these theories. And I say there are millions of us, but we need to get educated, help yourself first, really learn about cults and mind control, and then tell your story. Reach out to your family and friends. If you've cut off people that you care about in your family or friends, there are methods, and it's basically respectful curiosity and asking a good question and being quiet while you wait for the person to think for an answer. Thank you so much.